Hi guys, good afternoon and welcome to today's session. This is Primus Veku and this is our Primus Learning tutorial, the AWS tutorial series. In this session, we will look at S3, the Amazon S3 service. Last week, we looked at the VPC. If you have any questions about the VPC, please drop the questions on our comment section and we should be able to respond to them quickly. All right, today we'll be talking about Amazon S3. We'll have a couple of things that we'll do, and we'll have another session still for S3 because there's a whole lot of things that you can do with S3 as a service. We'll be learning those in these videos. So today, let's look at what S3 is all about. So Amazon S3 is an object storage service, which means you can store objects in this service, objects like files, CSV files, audio files, video files, any types of objects, right? You can store them in this type of storage. So this is offered by AWS and it is industry leading in terms of scalability, which means no matter how much quantity of data or how much amount of data you store in it, it is able to scale up and accept that data. In terms of availability, this is a service that is 99.9999999% always available, right? So, which means the chances for you not having your data are really, really, really limited, right? You always have your data according to the SLAs that AWS defines. In terms of security, it is a robust service. In terms of security, it gives you different types of security. You can encrypt your data as it is resting in AWS. So this is a really good service. And in terms of performance as well, it is very performant. And customers of all sizes and industries can use Amazon S3 to store and protect their data, right? And they do this for different use cases. They do this for different use cases such as data lakes. So large organizations can store their data, in these data lakes and be able to access that data from different platforms, from different sources, using different plugins, different connections, right? So it is really a data store where you can store your data and be able to access it from different locations. So you also have use cases like websites. You can run websites on S3. I will show you a use case where we just run, we run a simple static website on S3, and you're able to even host your applications and run them and make them work. Mobile applications, you can use S3 store data for mobile applications, backup and restore, archive, enterprise applications, IoT devices, and even big data workloads, right? Big data workloads for analytics purposes. So S3 really is that service that is huge. It's one of the biggest services that AWS offers. Tons and tons of organizations out there are using this service. Really, it's a huge service. It competes with services like I'm sure you've heard about Google Drive, Dropbox, and all of those types of object storage services out there. All right, so in this video we will remember the last time while we're treating the IAM service, we created an IAM user called the Primus Learning user. That is the user that we'll use to do a lot of work as far as this this tutorial is concerned. So log in. So this is what we'll be doing. We'll log in as that user. We'll log into our AWS account, and then we will create an S3 bucket. So we'll use this S3 service to create a bucket, and we'll be able to copy files over from that S3 from our local machine. So as a user, we'll be able to copy files from our local machine and move the files over to S3. So you see, we'll be able to copy files directly from here using that user that we have, or using whatever access that we have, right? We're able to authenticate, copy data from our local systems, And this is the copy action that happens, right? So it's using IAM permissions. You copy data and we'll store that data in S3 right here. So there are a couple of things that we'll do as far as this is concerned, or a couple of ways that we'll do this, right? We'll first of all do it from the AWS console, and then we'll do it from the terminal. So this is like the CLI, right? The AWS CLI. Remember, in a previous video, I told you or showed you how to download and install the CLI, and we used the CLI to create users. We used it to do other things. In this video, we use it to put data in S3 and also to access data from S3, or copy down or download data from S3. So this video is basically to show you how S3 works, to walk you through the interface and really help you learn about S3 and how it works, right? All right, so let's log into our AWS account. I'm already logged into my AWS account here. This is the account where we created. So you want to search for the service called S3, and this is the service. So you search for the service called S3 and go to the service. All right, so this is how it initially looks, right? This is how it initially looks. You have buckets. Buckets are like just the container that you'll be storing your files inside, the container that you'll be storing your objects inside. Right, so this is the buckets, and then you have different ways of granting access. So access grants, you can grant access to different people, different things. Object Lambda access points, you can use Lambda to access objects, and so many other things, right? We'll see them as we walk through this. So the very first thing I want to show you is to create an S3 bucket. So to create an S3 bucket, you simply click on create. And although this service is global, you see it shows that this service is global, right? Although it shows global here, you have to select a region when you're creating the bucket. Right, and it says here that buckets are simply containers for data stored in S3. Remember, I told you it's just a container where you can store your data. All right, you need to give it a name, and names in S3 are unique within the global namespace. These names are unique within the global namespace, and so no two buckets anywhere in the world should have the same name, and so they have to be unique. So we'll give this name Primus Learning Series S3 bucket. So that's the name we'll give this bucket. We know that this name probably is not existing. All right, yes, it's not existing. And so you also want to give it object ownership. And AWS says here that control ownership of objects written to this bucket from other AWS accounts, and the use of access control lists. So you want to be able to control who has access to this. So just leave it at default, will not change anything. And here, right, if you want this bucket to be publicly accessible by others out of this AWS account, then you can unblock this thing. You can unselect. You see, AWS will actually warn you if you do that down here. It will give you a very red warning down there. And you can read through this. It says public access is granted to buckets and objects through access control lists. Bucket policies, access point policies, or all. In order to ensure that public access to this bucket and its object is blocked, turn on block all public access, which is this one here, right? So we have to leave it on here. We don't want people to access our data from outside this account. You don't want anybody to deal with your data. And then you have the option of versioning. You can version control the objects that will be stored in your AWS bucket, in your S3 bucket, right? You see, versioning is a means of keeping multiple variants of an object in the same bucket. You can use versioning to preserve, retrieve, and restore every version of every object stored in your Amazon S3 bucket, which means you can store a file today, modify some data inside that same file, and store the second file, and it will keep the other version, the previous version of that document. So to do that, you need to enable it here, to enable versioning. But in this case, we'll not enable because it is just for our demo purposes. but you can try that out and see how it works. All right, you could also tag this data, any data, best practices or recommended practices for those who work in AWS environments. You'll know that it is you need to tag every service that you're creating. So you could tag this and just say name, and you give the name of the bucket, or environment. Maybe it's a prod environment. You just say prod, something like that, right? Just give it a tag like that. And then you want to have your data. Remember, I told you it is a secure space, so you can encrypt your data. You see, it says server-side encryption is automatically applied to new objects stored in this bucket. So the encryption type that is used is server-side encryption with Amazon S3 managed keys. It is called SSE-S3. There is another type of encryption that you could use, which is server-side encryption with AWS Key Management Service keys, with KMS keys. So keys that are created using the Key Management Service. You could explicitly create keys in the Key Management Service and use them to encrypt your data. You could also encrypt your data with dual layer server-side encryption with AWS Key Management Service keys. So this one is also created in KMS, but it is, you know, a different type. So once you select this one, you need to select the the you know, the ARN of that service from KMS. KMS is a service. You can create keys there. But for now, we'll just use the server side, the SSE encryption type. And also you could enable or disable bucket key. So using an S3 bucket key for SSE KMS reduces encryption costs. So this is about cost, right? And so it is enabled here. There are other options that you can decide to choose right here, right? But we'll not go through that because this is just for our demo purposes. So once you've done this, you can go ahead and create your bucket. So you see, you just hit create there and your bucket automatically creates. So we have two buckets here. The one that we just created is called Primus Learning as Primus Learning -S3 bucket, right? So Primus Learning series -S3 bucket, and there is no data inside. You see, it is empty. And it says here that objects are the fundamental entities stored in Amazon S3. So you store objects in the bucket. It is just like you create a folder on your local system, or you create a path on your system and you store files inside, right? That is the same thing, or in a network share or file share system. So here you see that you could create folders. You can create a folder just as you create it in your local system. So if you create a folder here, you could call it maybe 2015-data that you want to store for 2015. You just create that and hit create, and that's it. You will have a folder here where you can store your data. So you go in now, you can store data in here. So what we could do is we could upload data inside this folder that we've created. So if you see, there's an upload button here. This is the terminal. This is the console method, right? We're uploading data through the console, through this graphical user interface. So you can either click here to upload, or you click here to upload. So let's go ahead and click here to upload data in this S3 bucket. Now you could also choose a folder, right? You could also add a folder here or add files. So what we want to add is files. So we want to add a file, upload a file in this bucket, and we'll upload the file called 2015 underscore Q1. So maybe it's Q1 data about something, right? You just do that, select the file, and then scroll down, and you could also manage the permissions here, right? You see, you could manage the permissions, the properties and everything, grant access and so on and so forth on this bucket. And you could also select a storage class. This is absolutely important, guys. Amazon S3 offers a range of storage classes designed for different use cases, right? And so you have different use cases. You have what is called S3 Express One Zone, where you store data in just one zone, and availability here is not as much as you want it to be, right? You see, it says the availability zones for one zone is just one availability zone, right? While the standard option that we're selecting here is having greater than 3 availability zones, which means this data will be available. If something happens in one availability zone, the data will be available in the next availability zone. If something happens in the next availability zone, data will be available in the next availability zone, and above 3 availability zones. That's what this one means, right? And this type of class, right, this type of storage class is selected for data that is frequently accessed, data, frequently accessed data. So data that you want to access more than once a month or more than once a day and so on, with millisecond access, right? So you want that type of data to be stored in standard storage. And then there is intelligent tiering. Intelligent steering is the data. You want to store the data with changing or unknown access patterns, such that AWS can automatically transition it to any storage where it deems necessary because of the access that you're using, right? So let's say you store something in this storage tier, and you don't access it for the next 90 days. AWS can move it from this storage tier and see that, hey, no, this is not data that is accessed every month. It can move it from there and store it in another storage tier, which is cheaper. It could store it in Glacier, which is cheaper. These ones, the ones that is cheaper, is the one where people don't usually access very frequently. So you see the difference. So in this case, you put it in standard tier, AWS will automatically, that is where intelligent tiering occurs. AWS uses its machine learning capabilities to figure out that, hey, this person is not accessing this data frequently. Let me move it to a tier that is infrequently accessed. That way, I save that person cost. So you select this option in that case. There is the next option or storage class, which is called the standard IA. The standard IA, which is meant for infrequently accessed data once a month with millisecond access. So infrequent data, you see, infrequent access. IA here means infrequent access. And like once a month, and it's general purpose, so you could store your data here if it's infrequently accessed per month, and the availability zones here are greater than 3 and 30 days above. And then there's one zone IA, one zone infrequent access. This is for data that is recreatable, infrequently accessed, and stored in a single availability zone. So this one, if you are choosing availability, you want to be up on the three, but if you're choosing just one, if you don't care about maybe losing some data, or your data not being available at one point, then you can choose this option right here. There is the Glacier Instant Retrieval, which is long-lived archive data accessed once a quarter with instant retrieval in milliseconds. So this is the type of data that maybe accessed 3 times or 4 times a year, right? Right, 4 times or 3 times a year. So you want to store that data in Glacier. But when you need that data, it should be available to you immediately. This is the tier you would want to store that type of data in. And it is it's also very available because it is stored in 3 or above availability zones. Then you have Glacier Flexible Retrieval, formerly Glacier. This one is for long-lived archive data accessed once a year with retrieval of minutes to hours. So this one is data that you can access just maybe once a year. You want to store that type of data here. Then there is what is called the Glacier Deep Archive. This is the long-lived archive data accessed less than once a year with retrieval of hours. So you have, if you don't care about the time to access this data, you want to retrieve it after some hours, you can store it in deep archive. Then there is the reduced redundancy. This is non-critical, frequently accessed data with milliseconds access, and not recommended, as S3 standard is more cost effective for this type of use cases. So these are the storage classes that you could choose of. AWS would default any bucket that you're creating to the standard storage class, which is the one we are selecting for this demo. And then the server-side encryption, you want to specify a particular key that you would use or not, you can select that, right? So this is server-side encryption that protects data at rest. So this is data that is sitting. So remember I told you there's data encryption at rest and data encryption in transit. So once it is moving, right, you want to encrypt it so that nobody can peep into your data, nobody can access your data. You use the SSE encryption which you selected above. But now we're talking about the server-side encryption that is at rest, where you store your data and that data is encrypted. You see, it says if your bucket policy requires objects to be encrypted with a specific encryption key, you must specify the same encryption key when you upload objects, otherwise uploads will fail. All right, you do that, and then the rest of the things you can just leave them and simply click on upload. And it will take some time because that file is huge. Take some time to upload the data, and we should have that data available in a couple of minutes here. So you see, it's estimating that the data will the upload time would be a minute, right? You can see your transfer capabilities. It's moving. It's done 26%, and this is the file. The file type is a CSV, right? It's a CSV file, and the progress is this. You can see it happening. So let's give it a moment for this data to upload, and we will, try to access that data or try to use the data in different ways. All right, so it's uploading. Let's give it a moment here. While it's uploading, ensure that you have your AWS CLI installed. We did this. I showed you in a previous video how to install the AWS CLI. It will be needed to also copy files from your local environment to AWS. So that's another method, right? Remember, we're showing you different methods to do the same thing. That is how you would work, right? When you get to your environment, to a real work environment, you'll be doing things in different ways. Maybe you want to just upload something quickly in S3 for just once, or you want to upload large data sets, right, from your local system or from a different system to AWS. You get to do that through maybe the terminal or another means. All right, or you can write a bash script that does that for you. All right, you can see that the data has been uploaded successfully. It shows you whatever has been uploaded and everything looks good right here. You can hit close and you see your data is stored in S3. This data is available. It has a timestamp. So all of these details about the data is called the metadata about the data. The metadata is just data or information about that data that you've stored, right? And so the date, this is the date, the date it was lastly modified, which is today. It shows you the size, it shows you the class and everything. You can click on this data and you can also download the data right from here, right? So if I were to download this data, I'll just do download. If I open it here, right, you can also open it. It will show you access denied because probably you didn't grant access to view that data that way, right? You show you access denied there, and you see it's actually downloaded because I didn't. I'm the one, right? It's noticing that I'm the one who has access. I have this type of access trying to open it. So it downloads it for me. And there are different things that you could do to this file, right? You could download as, you could share with a pre-signed URL. That means you can share this file for a limited number of minutes or for an hour so that somebody accesses that data and it expires within that time frame, right, that you've defined. So if you do share here, right, you see the minutes, it'll ask you to define the minutes, and then let's say you just want to access this in 2 minutes, in 1 minute, and after 1 minute it expires. You create this and click create, and it will give you a URL and you can share with somebody. This would be accessible, but after that time frame it will expire. So you see, you would do this and that person is able to download this data. You see, I'm able to download this data right here. You see it's downloading, and we'll give it a minute. So after 1 minute, you come back here and you will not be able to download it because it has expired. The time for it for you to access it has expired. Maybe you gave somebody access just 1 minute and you're done. You don't have access anymore. There are times that you want to do something like that. So this is very important. AWS offers you that opportunity to do that. So in a minute, if you click here again, that opportunity should be gone already. So let's see. It's not a minute yet. Let's go back here. So that's one option. There are other options, right? You could calculate the size of the file, which is good. The total size of the file. You could copy this file to another bucket. You could move the file from where it is currently from this folder. It's just like moving a file from one folder to another. You could actually query this data within S3. This is a very, very huge service, right? You query the data right from S3, just like you queried any other data, right? You see how it will select objects from the particular bucket, and you can run this query and see data about this. This is a very cool feature about this service, right? You could run and see data about this. You see, it selects and gives you returns data about this, right? It shows you information about whatever is stored inside the S3. But this right here, guys, is really neat. Look at, it gives you the data. It's just like you're running a SQL statement to select data. So it says here, to create a reference point for writing SQL, you can display the first 5 records of input data by running the following query. So select star from S3 object as limit 5. So you could limit it to 10. You see, we saw the first 5 records. You could run the query now, and it will give you the 10 records, right? Instead of 5. These are the first 10 records right here. It gives you everything. And this is the data that I was expecting. I can see I can see the start date, I can see the start station, end date, end station, bike number. This is data about bikes that are moving, right? So this guys is really nice. It's really nice. S3 is a very good service. And you could do other things here like renaming object, editing storage class to change that storage class that I showed you, editing server-side encryption, editing metadata, editing tags, and so on and so forth. These are some of the things that you could do here. And if we go back to that data and rerun this, you see, it tells you access denied. So we no longer have access to that to that data because it's above 1 minute, and we defined a pre-signed URL, and the time for that pre-signed URL was just 1 minute, guys. So this is how S3 works. Store data here. You could use that data the way you want, and you should be able to change things here, move things around, and grant permissions, right? You could change the permissions here, who has access to it, and so on and so forth. So if you go to this file, you could change the permissions, update the permissions, do a lot of things with this file right here. You could do it at the level of the bucket as well. You can actually use this bucket to create a dynamic or a static website. I will show you how you do that in a couple of moments, right? So if we come back to our diagram here, you see that we have created an S3 bucket. So it should be this one. We've created an S3 bucket, and we've copied data over using our access, right? The access that we authenticated with, which is an IAM type of access. And we're able to copy files over from our local system to S3 and store it there. Now we want to be able to do that same thing. We'll store it in the same S3 bucket, but we want to copy data from our local machine, right? Using the terminal, using what is called the CLI, the AWS CLI. So what will happen here is we'll go to our terminal. So our terminal can just log in here. Remember, we created a user and had the secret key and the secret access key for that user. And we did AWS configure because we had installed the AWS CLI on our system. So today we'll just use that system. So if you have not done this, please go back and watch the previous video. And in this series, it's still within this series, watch the IAM section and come back and install the CLI, and you follow this section, right, guys? You should be able to do that. Else, drop us a link, drop us a comment, and we should be able to help you walk through the process. All right, so what you want to do here is you want to do AWS S3 LS to see the buckets that are in your AWS account, right? Remember, we just created a bucket. So you could do this and query data in your AWS account. So we are just listing data in our S3 buckets, right? So we just use the AWS S3 API to list the bucket in our account. And here is the bucket that we want to access data from or want to store data in. And if you look at this file, at this directory, we have some files in here, right? We have some files called IAM VPC. Let's say we want to upload VPC in AWS into that bucket, right? You want to upload a file from your local system or a folder from your local system to, to S3. You could do that, right? So if I want to access this, right, if I want to, copy files over, what you do is you type in your CLI commands, right? And these commands are available in AWS documentation, guys. So if you go to AWS documentation and search for, look at how you get these commands. You search for AWS CLI documentation and just search version 2, right? You see, get started with the CLI. It will just give you everything. So AWS CLI command references, you just click that and go here. You see every service, right? Every service is listed, guys. Every service is listed. S3, let's look for S3, which is S and 3. You see S3, and you can see different things about S3. The copy commands, look at the copy commands, single local file and S3 objects. So you see the CP command is copy command. Some commands perform operations only on single files and S3 objects. The following commands are single file objects operations if no dash recursive flag is provided. So if you provide a dash recursive flag on it, it will copy multiple folder files, like a folder, right? Like files inside a folder if you use this recursive. So the commands you could use would be CP to copy, MV to move, and RM to remove files. You could also use sync. These are different files. So guys, you make use of these documentation. Very important to learn how they work, right? And they are even giving you examples. So you see, I'm just typing an example. This is the example I'll type, right? AWS S3, because the service you are using is an AWS S3 service. And this is the command that it provides, right? So for us to do that, to copy those files, we'll just say AWS S3 CP, which is what we just saw above. And then we want to give the folder name. So what's the folder name we want to copy? Remember, we just listed the folder names here. We want to copy the VPC. So you will just say VPC. Ensure that that folder is correctly named. That folder is correctly named. You have an error. And then you want to list the bucket. What bucket are you copying into, right? You have to give the bucket. So the bucket should be given here this way. The bucket should be given this way in the form of a URL, right? A complete URL. So S3 colon / or / the bucket name. What's the bucket name? Remember, we listed the bucket name above. So you just copy the bucket name from here and paste here. And then the folder name, right? So remember, we had a folder in that bucket. We had a folder inside that bucket, and the folder name in that bucket was called this. So you just copy that folder and paste it here, right? So / that folder, and you should be able to copy this data over into it. So let's try that. If you have an error, you figure out what the error is, right, and try to fix it. And so you see that upload failed. It gives you the reason why an upload failed here. It says upload VPC dash to this bucket failed. Need to rewind the stream. This is option, but stream is not seekable. So it's giving an error here. You can copy this if you don't know what this means and search. So how would you search this error? You have to be able to debug This is exactly what you'll be doing at work. If you have this error at work, what do? Copy that error, go with it to here, to a browser, just paste that error as it is like that and run it. You see, S3 upload fails. We need to rewind, blah, 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 right? It gives you this guy, somebody somewhere else has had that error. Somebody somewhere else has had that error, and you need to see that, you need to figure out from the responses that that person got. So you just go here, you can open this one, open different options, and search what that error is all about, right? I encountered the following error while playing with blah, blah, blah. This guy is talking about this. I had this issue today too, but apparently the problem was with AWS region. Make sure you haven't already created a bucket, and if you did, make sure it's in the region you're expecting. What was the problem with this? So these guys are giving their options. Some people will face the same weird issue. Maybe it was related to AWS outage and blah blah blah. So let's see. Let's rerun this and see. Remove this and try that. So it failed again with the same error. So what we'll do is let's put this as a folder, right? So what you're trying your options, right? So let's put this. And it doesn't see that path. Let's do this because there are multiple files in that. And we do recursive right here. So who remembers us doing this? And you run this. And the files are uploaded. So what we saw here a moment ago, right? You saw in in the AWS documentation. No, not that one. We saw in the AWS documentation just a moment ago that recursive simply uploads multiple files. You see? So we just used that, the recursive, which is here, and it's able to upload. Why? Because there are multiple files inside this folder. If you go into this folder, you discover that there are multiple files inside, right? So if you go here and go to that file, it's the AWS tutorial Primus Learning Series. If you go here and go, no, it's not this one. Let's see where that folder is. The folder is inside downloads. So if we just do cd vpc and do dir inside vpc, you see there are multiple files inside that folder. And so it was requiring you to do the recursive, right? It needed us to do it recursively. And that's what we did. And it gave us the expected result. So you see the files have been uploaded. You can see this file has been uploaded. This file has been uploaded. Two files have been uploaded. And if you go to our S3 bucket, if you go back to our S3 bucket and go inside this folder, you should be able to, and refresh, you should be able to see those two files. So you refresh, and here you are, two files uploaded. You see the two files have been uploaded. You could also download those two files. So we're currently in this location, right? We're currently in this location. We could go into another location and download these files inside, or create maybe a file in here and download. So you could create a folder in here. So you could go to download and go to the series thing. So it's Primus Learning AWS Tutorial Series. That's the name. It's not the one we searched for. It's Primus Learning AWS Tutorial Series, this file. So you could go inside here, and let's say you come in here and create a folder here called downloads, downloaded file, downloaded. Let's just put it downloaded, right? And go into here and cd into downloaded. So we cd into downloaded, and try to download the files from S3 again, from that location. So to download the file from that location, we will need to use the same type of command, right? So we'll do AWS CP. So you're copying this time, you want to give the bucket from where you're copying, right? So AWS, S3 CP, you're copying from. You have to give the from location. So where are you copying this from? I'm copying this from a particular bucket. This time you see I'm not giving the location of the file. When I was copying to AWS, I gave the location of the file right here. But this time I'm copying from. So I have to give the location, the bucket from where I'm copying. So I want to copy from S3, and then you give the full path like that, the full name, and then you give your bucket name. The bucket name was Primus. Let's just copy the bucket name from here. And want to copy plus the folder location, right? So it's important you copy plus that. So you want to copy that. That's the bucket name. There's a folder in it called, that folder is called user. That folder is called this. Let's just copy this folder. So slash that folder, right? Just do that. And then where are you copying it to? You're copying it to this particular location. Maybe you're copying it to your local, to this folder right here. You could just put a dot there and then dash dash recursive. Let's say you put a dot and say slash. Yeah, let's try that and see. Okay, so it's downloading the folders, all the folders. You see it's downloaded all of it. So it downloaded it directly to this location. Why did we put just a dot? We're copying to this particular to the current location, right? So it downloaded all the files. But if it was in a different location, you would have put a dot slash that location, right? Or you just give the path. This path is just like the path where you're downloading the file into. So if you do dir here, remember there were no files in here. Now you have files. There are 3 files here because this file was already existing in that location. And then we just downloaded 2 more files to add to it. So guys, by this, you're learning how you could use, the AWS CLI to download files, copy files over to S3, or do anything. You could do a lot of manipulation, list these files, see the files, and do whatever you need to do with these commands. So imagine that you wanted this to be done automatically through an automatic process. All you need to do is you write a script, maybe a bash script. For those who know bash, we'll introduce bash scripting in another series. Right? You write a bash script and simply put this command in the bash script, right? This command in the bash script, and it will perform this action when it's executing that script. Maybe schedule that script to do something. Maybe you want files to be copied over from one bucket to a different location at certain times, or every day, or at a particular hour in the day, right? You can schedule that job to do that action for you, and you'll not need to do anything. So there are various ways that you could do this, right? Most organizations nowadays are copying data from different sources and storing that data in S3 as their data store. So they copy data from different sources. Let's say from their local systems in CSV format. They copy it from data warehouses or different types of data stores in different locations offered by different organizations. They bring that data in different formats and store it and convert that data into a particular format. Those who deal with machine learning and data engineering, they know a lot about Parquet format, and data that is stored in Parquet format is very neat and good for for querying, right? For querying using machine learning tools and services. And so you could copy that data. You could have a pipeline a data pipeline that copies that data or brings that data from these different locations or different sources and store it in S3 as a single source of truth for your organization, and your organization uses that data to really to clean it up, to massage the data, to do data cleansing on it, and then build other processes. It could be data optimization, it could be machine learning processes that are built on top of that data, and then that data is stored in a different location from where you can query and work with the data and get insight about the data and make it useful, right? So in our next tutorial, guys, we will go above this, right? We've stored data in S3, but we'll go above this and crawl that data using another service. So we'll introduce other services like Glue, where we'll create a Glue crawler, a job that gets this data that we've stored in S3 and converts that data into tables, right? And that data can be queried from another service within AWS or even external from AWS. So we'll do this in our next video. So watch out, guys, and subscribe to our channel. Go ahead and hit the notification button so that when the next video is coming up, you're able to see it, and this is how it will look, right? It will look like this, but we'll introduce it in our very next session. So thanks, guys, for watching, and see you again in the next video.